So we have now started the recording again. Going back now to our slideshow. We just took our break. So now we're back to parts and drawings. That's what we'll discuss for a little bit here. I'll just share my screen. Here we are. Good. So I see we have a comment in the chat. Thank you, Eleanor. The particular topic that you're speaking about, the downloading parts from libraries and then mating them to other parts and things like this will be discussed in detail in our second CAD session that will be hosted by Ian McTavish tomorrow evening from 6 to 9 p.m. So that's the sort of flow. This first session here is designed particularly for those for whom OnShape is a new software program. And then tomorrow we'll go into those very much more FRC specific features, such as downloading parts from parts libraries and creating assemblies. So we can also take just a little bit of a look at how the EveryBot was organized with assemblies and sub-assemblies today. That might just sort of be a little introduction to this notion of parts libraries and the like. But hopefully by tomorrow evening, we will have answered your question, Eleanor. So thank you very much. So we'll see what we can do with assemblies in our second part here. So we're looking at parts and drawings now. As you see here, I've taken my little bracket for the 3D printer and cast it in 3 different views. You can put multiple views into a drawing. You can put dimensions on the drawing, and then you can share that drawing with various collaborators to have it manufactured, especially those parts that are going to be hand manufactured. And increasingly, parts in our parts lists are being CNC manufactured, and they may not have the drawing stage. It would be interesting to hear from various collaborators here how we manufacture parts using a CNC. Do we still have the drawing, and how do we use the drawing in this case? Because if you're doing a hand machining of a part, then the drawing is definitely essential. But maybe the machine doesn't need that. There are different ways to actually have the part manufactured by a machine. We can take a look at how we would do that in OnShape, for example. Okay, so let's take a look at the overall process of making a part into the drawing. We've already had a little introduction to this in the first part. You'll notice, well, something I found that's very useful. Repeating ideas in a classroom helps to make them more familiar. So you'll notice I made several mentions to zooming or right-clicking or left-clicking or the like during the last session. I also made several references to starting a new document, creating a sketch, adding constraints to the sketch. But I also briefly introduced making a part, because now we're going to be talking about a part and it's slightly more familiar to everyone here. That said, the only time that I really would speak too much is kind of in a session like this. In my classroom, I may speak a little bit, and maybe I would speak for about 5 or 6 minutes about a sketch, but then I would have the students make a sketch and then go around the classroom and see them making it and encourage them to teach each other about making the sketch as well, making it as interactive as possible. So this session here does not lend itself to that, as we're also recording it for a home audience. But since some of you have mentioned pedagogy and sharing the ideas of OnShape with your groups, your teams, your classes, etc., I thought I'd just make a comment about that I gravitated from almost exclusively speaking in my first few years of teaching to having this approach where I see each student as a teacher, and I might just speak a few minutes to get everyone on the same vision about what we want to accomplish, and then have the students branch out into various tasks that may not even all be the same, but achieve a goal for the whole class. And that's what I would do with CAD. So I would show sketches briefly just to tell them that's what we're learning. And then I'd have the students teach me how to do certain things in sketching. And same with the 3D parts and features and all of that. A lot of the things that I ended up learning over the years were just having my students teach me things as I go around the classroom, and then sharing that with the rest of the class or with other students and so on. So for that reason, please feel most free to chime in. I see a few chat comments here, so let's see what we have. Yes. So Peter's comments, producing orthographic drawings, front, top, right. Yeah, my drawing here is just a quickly, rapidly assembled one here. It's just an example of what the drawing looks like. But I think that is correct. You would do a front and a top right. And then the isometric image. So I have a side and I have maybe a back, and then I have my isometric. I may have also been able to put a front image there down in this space here to give several views. And then you can see the dimensions. I haven't fully constrained it. I just showed how you can put various dimensions in here. So this does not give enough information to draw the part, but it shows how you can use these dimensions to give enough information to draw the part. So thank you for that comment, Peter. Some students don't relate as well to orthographic ONL, I think, shapes of parts. So the students may have some trouble conceptualizing the full picture of what the part is, given certain views of the part. And that's something you have to explore over time. And of course, in a class of 30 students, maybe 5 of them really love CAD and kind of understand these things intuitively, and 5 others really don't have that sort of mindset. And that's okay, because on a team, we have various strengths that we can play to in our interdisciplinary approach in at least in a robotics setting. So that's something to keep in mind. In my robotics teams, I usually had about 4 or 5 students who were really into the CAD, and then other students who were into other parts of the robotics. And so I would organize my classes accordingly, and maybe have those students learn part of the CAD and then share it with the other students where necessary. Okay, so there's a big picture of parts and drawings. We've already made a few parts, but we haven't made any drawings yet. So let's see how to do all of that. Okay, we will go to parts. You can see here, there's a part I was playing around with just to learn some of the features of OnShape. I made a closed loop, I extruded it, and then I added some features to some of the edges. This is no particular part, and I just wanted to practice doing the various shapes and constraints and features in my OnShape. So we've seen this process already, but it's always good to remember it. We start with our 2D sketch selected, and then we extrude the sketch to a 3D part. You can almost see what was done here. And then we make additional sketches on the 3D planes and repeats, applying holes and extrusions on the surface, and we've already seen that. And we can look into holes, fillets, linear operations, rotational operations. So all of that we've already seen with our parts. And now we can speak a little bit about drawings, how to make a drawing out of a part. So what I think I'll do, maybe I'll make one more part, because repetition can never hurt. And I encourage you, if you would like to work at home and share with us some of your work, please feel most free to do that. Maybe I'll design some other piece of my 3D printer and go through that process again, but this time I will make a drawing of that part. So here's my quite strange shape. I don't even know what it is. But you can see I've dimensioned out in this drawing the various features of this part with 3 different views from the side, from the end, and isometric, and then from the top. And you can put information here about who did the drawing, what's the date, is this the final version of the drawing, is it being reviewed, and so on. Okay, so there's the process for drawings. Let's go about that. Back to our OnShape, here is our part. Perhaps since we already have this part, we can make a drawing of this part, and then we can repeat the process and create a new part and bring it into a drawing. So since we already have a part here, this Z-axis bracket for a 3D printer, let's create a part out of the drawing. I can go to here and I'm going to select it. You'll see there's a slightly different menu. If I select the extrusion, that's an operation. So there are a few selection or possibilities. But if I click on the part itself, look at all of these possibilities, one of which create a drawing of part 1. Well, looking back here, this is part 1. I'm going to double click on it here or right click and rename it because it's actually not really part 1. It's a good practice to give a name. This is what I would call the Z-axis bracket for my 3D printer. So I'll name it that. Okay, so now we can kind of make sense of what everything is. Right click it again. I'm going to make a drawing of this Z-axis bracket. And there are several sort of standards we can follow. I'm just going by the default, but I'm going to specify 4 views. That's kind of nice. Look at that. It's going to be fairly quick at creating my drawing. There we are. Maybe we can make these bigger. So that's something definitely, I'm not really using a lot of the space here. So there may be a way to make my part a little bigger. I'm not sure about that right now. Let's see what the tools are in my drawing. So we can insert a view, projected, different views here. And we can crop the view, do different things like that. We can, of course, add dimensions. And we can add data and geometric tolerances. These are engineering features here. And we can put other things in here in the drawing to make it better. We can put guidelines and center lines there to show certain features in our parts. Oh, and then add additional lines. Then we can also insert an existing drawing and do all of that. I don't see a way here to actually magnify the parts. Maybe someone already knows that. If you do know that, that would be good. My intuition is to slightly magnify these parts. I don't think that's crucial at the moment, but it would be nice to know how to do. But what I'm going to do here is just apply a few dimensions onto my part right now. Oops. Here we go. So go to my dimensioning tool. And oh, look at this. There are all kinds of dimensions that I can apply right now. I'm just going to do a regular dimension on this side here, that side there. I can dimension this hole here, which would be diameter. There's my 3 millimeter and my 5 millimeter holes. And of course, this hole here is a 30 millimeter. And then I can take a look at the thickness, go back here to a simple dimension, zoom in, And there's my 5mm dimension there, and so on. So I can dimension away as I feel. Then I can also maybe find the dimension between these two features, holding down Shift, see if it will allow me to find a distance between them. You have to be careful when we're in an isometric view. It may not give exactly what we want. So it's probably a good idea to try that in this view here. So I will take this feature and that feature, and there, now there's a 30mm separation between those holes, and a 30mm separation between these ones. Holding down Shift each time allows me to select 2 or more features at a time. And there, I've put some dimensions on my drawing. I can zoom in. I'm holding down my center mouse button to pan, and then I can draw in here. Double clicking allows me this has been checked, this has not been checked. I can type some information here. For example, I can call this my z-axis bracket, put in a note here, and put in certain fonts and all of this. And it has the scale, all kinds of little things I can do. Depends on how sophisticated you want to get your team and how much of an engineering class you're doing, or well, anyway, there's an open-ended sort of availability of features for your engineering and drawing. Okay, so there is the idea of how to do a drawing for a particular part. Maybe we can repeat the process then and start with a part and go all the way up to a drawing again. I was just thinking of Peter's class, because he says that in his class there are a fair number of CNC operations, making parts using CNC machines, and many others out there also have that. So for a CNC, you can't give a drawing to a machine, you actually give an exported part. So if we look at our tabs at the bottom, I have my part studio here and my drawing, and I can assemble this part with other parts on this tab. I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to go back to my part. What if I were feeling like 3D printing this part or CNC machining it or whatever it is? Right clicking again, I can export. And see, this stereolithographic format, STL format, is perfect for putting into a 3D printing program. And so there's my STL Part Studio. I've got my units, my resolution, and my options. I'm going to download it. Okay. And then there it is. Part Studio bracket STL. There it's downloaded. I wonder if that opens on my computer. I suppose I can choose the application to open it. I don't know if I have one at the moment installed, but I could open it on some kind of 3D printing program and then have it show up there. So that's my way of exporting into a format that a CNC machine may use. There we are. So when we come back here, maybe we will start one more time and design a part from scratch. You can do the same as I'm doing this if you like, or just follow along however you like. And please feel most free to comment and or share your work. We'll be glad to take a look at the work you've been doing as well. All right, so here we go with a brand new part. I went to the top left corner to create a new document. And I wonder if I can maybe call this, let's call this the y-axis bracket. So this particular bracket is going to be slightly different. There will be a piece that holds a motor, not unlike the piece that we have seen, but then there will be a part that holds it onto the y-axis in a slightly different way. So let us start on the top plane again. And I'll create a sketch. Make a rectangle once again. This one I'll kind of make square. And if I recall correctly, this one needs to be something like 42 millimeters here. Whoops. Click on my dimension. I'll make this one 42 millimeters. But this one, I'm going to make it slightly bigger at 47 millimeters. And you'll see why in a moment. Okay, that's my part so far. I'm going to put my motor mount here. So my 5 circles for my motor mount will go on here. So these will be a little familiar. And you see I'm drawing them rather quickly and not carefully enough to make them look all the same, because that doesn't really matter at the moment. And then I will do my constraints. So this one, and it should be centered both vertically and horizontally. And since the 42 millimeters is the sort of footprint of the motor, this 5 millimeters is going to be for another part that's coming out, or another section of the part coming out in a third dimension here. So I'm going to constrain these dimensions horizontally and vertically, holding down my shift to get 2 pieces at a time. That's 19. Half of 42 is 21. So it's going to center it where I want it to be. There's the horizontal distance, and the vertical distance also should be 21. Good. The radius of this, if I recall again, it should be 30. Well, I was pretty close. There. And let's make this one 3. All of these should be 3. So I'm starting to get a lot of constraints here. I can kind of drag them around. I escaped out of the constraint tool. See if I can drag these pieces here. There we are. That little hand appears. And then I can sort of clean it up so that we can see all the constraints at the same time without getting things too much out of order. So you can play around with how that best looks so that everything is kind of easy to read on the drawing. And there I've got all of the sizes for my hole specified. I'm going to just try specifying distance for all of these. Holding down shift, click these 2, and this distance will be 30 again. And we'll make this side 30. Oops. And holding down shift, get these 2, make this one 30. And this one is 30. Now, I have a 4-sided figure. All 4 sides are 30. The thing is, I haven't necessarily specified that any one part is at a particular angle. So I probably have something of a rhombus here, may not have right angles. So to fix that, I can also take the vertical distance between these and make it 0. And the vertical, or that's and the horizontal distance between these ones. Oops, try that again. Control Z, let's hold down Shift, select the 2 parts. Here we are. Select one, select the other with Shift down, and it's talking about that distance. That I want to get the vertical distance between the horizontal distance between them to be 0. Try these ones. It's continuing to just talk about my vertical distance, I wanted the horizontal distance to be the right way. I'm going to meanwhile try these parts. Ah, here we go. That's what I wanted. Make that 0. And you see so on and so on. Oh, something really happened here. Whatever my constraints are, it came way off. But if I make this 0, it should now be fixed. So something somewhere could not be solved. Let's take a look at, that has to be 30. And this distance has to be 30. Something got constrained the wrong way. Maybe because of where everything was. I'll take this off then. Okay, let's see if there, now it's a little bit better. So I might have to play around with things like this just to get everything okay. I can also move these around. So now they're all constrained to be moving around. I just have to specify where this is horizontally and vertically from there to get it exactly right. So with a little bit of mathematics, I could figure out exactly how far up and over. I'm just going to guess some values right now. But I would probably have to do this step to get it exactly. I'm just going to guess something like 5 here and 5 this way to get it kind of centered. It actually is going to be 6. If I'm correct, I'll put a 6 there. Maybe I'll put that as a 6 here. If I can't get it, I can zoom in, double click it, make that 6. I think that should kind of center it. And then I could drag around all of these parts, escape out of the tool, and then when I'm escaped, then handles will appear on each feature that I've done. I can move them around and clean it up again, however I see fit. Okay, there's my constrained shape, and I should be able to do an extrusion now with that sketch to make it 3D. I'm going to make this a 5mm extrusion. There we are. All right, so there I have part of my bracket for my x-axis. So now the next thing I may do, I'm going to go back onto this surface here. Once I'm done my extrude, I'll select this top surface, and I'm going to make a little drawing here, a place to actually attach the motor onto my 3D printer. So let's make a place to do the attaching. A simple rectangle should suffice. Make a sketch on top there. Oops, not an extrusion, a sketch rather. And you see I accidentally unselected my surface, so I select it first. Make a sketch and a simple rectangle, maybe right here. It's going to be a 5mm wide section. Constraining this to be 5. There we are, and hopefully it lines up along there, and that seems okay. So I can select that sketch, number 2, and extrude that, and I suppose we can 25, maybe 30, make that 30. And there's my second part of my part. It's been extruded out, and this is where I'm going to put a few holes to attach this to the rail of my 3D printer. And so I'm going to make a sketch right here. And there will probably be some holes maybe towards the top there. First, I'll make a sketch and 2 5mm holes. There's one here. Oh, I made 2 of them. I'll just drag another one around. Whoa, escape out of there. Try that again. There we are. And let's make them exactly 5mm with some constraints. And there it is. We will now take a look from the right side, and we will constrain them vertically let's see, we can, for example, here's something interesting, a construction from midpoint to midpoint. Oh, whoops. I was in the dimension tool. Let's see if that works without the dimension tool. There we are. Okay, so you see I just made a dashed line because I put on the construction. So this is actually not part of my part, but this construction here allows me to imagine pieces that are just guiding my efforts to put things together. There we are. So I can specify the length of this construction. Let's see if that actually moves them around. Let's dimension it, and we'll put them 20 millimeters apart. There we are. I can also specify a distance from this line to this line. Oops. Start with the point. Hold down Shift, and there we are. Oops, I have to redo my dimension because I had pressed Escape there. So I just clicked on one point and this other one. There's my dimension, and that's 8 millimeters at the moment. Since that's 20, I want to make this 10. There, now that should center it. Since this is 10 and the whole length is 20, now they're exactly centered about that center line. And that center line was hopefully on the halfway points that naturally sort of come up when I'm making these little construction. You see the midpoint just appears, so I can create these constructions at strategic points along my objects. The final thing I may want to do is constrain them vertically. So I will take this. Now it's not a construction, that's fine. Hold down Shift as I click these 2 points and make this 0. Oops, I think it was trying for a horizontal rather than vertical approach. Let's try this again. Holding down Shift, selecting these 2. It's actually looking at, there we are. I have to go very close to that center line to get it to go for the horizontal distance rather than the vertical distance. Now when I make this 0, now it lines all up. They're vertically aligned and they're halfway symmetric around this center line. Good. Now my sketch is done and I should be able to select it and then make an extrusion. And we review here. Oh, by default, it's going to extrude out. That's okay. We're going to remove it. There we are. And there's my new part, my y-axis bracket. And it should be, for my purposes, it should be almost ready for printing. I do have to check how far up or down these holes have to go. I'll have to do a little bit of playing around to get that right. These holes probably should not be so close to these ones so that we may attach the motor. They'll have to be slid down a little bit. Let's go back to my sketch. I could actually do that. Now I should be able to, go into this sketch and take my right view. I double clicked that. After I've done a little bit of measurement, and it should be able to get me back into my sketch. It looks though that I kind of destroyed the extrusion. That's okay, I'll just regenerate it here, make a new one. And remove, and okay, there we are. So sometimes you just have to be careful. I think I inadvertently erased my extrusion there. And there's my object. I can create a drawing out of this now. And we'll see what it looks like as a 3D drawing. Okay, so I'm going to rename this part, which has been created as, with my right click, I'll just call this y-axis bracket. Okay, and then I should be able to click on the whole part itself. Oh, and create a drawing with 4 views. There we are. And I've got some nicely generated views. The scale on this one is a little better. And I should be able to put some dimensions on here. Now it came with a nice center point for this circle here. So let's put some dimensions on from this corner. Holding down shift, I'll go to the center and we can see that's 21. This side is 42. Here there's a 42 and there's a 5. Then we can select the dimension of a diameter. There are some 3mm holes here. And there's my 30mm hole. And so on, we can continue through this whole process. Back to my dimension here, and then put some measurements on these parts. For some reason, oh yeah, there's my 47. Probably should be a 40. Oh, it's a 35 there. Okay. There's my 5. Okay, so I've got some dimensions going on here. Oh, I want to do the whole. I have to remember to change my part tool over to diameter of holes. And there, I've gradually started specifying all the dimensions of this object. There we have my drawing, and it's ready to share with someone who may manufacture this if I were making it out of metal on some kind of mill machine. Or alternatively, I can go back to my part in my part studio on this tab here, click on the whole part, and perhaps just export it as an STL. Or a number of other formats are also available. There's my y-axis bracket there. I just exported it as an STL, and we'll see what happens there. Right, so there is a little bit about how to make parts and how to make drawings. So the final part of our discussion today, we may take a look at, well, how might we put some of these parts together? Okay, so let's see what we can do. Going back to this OnShape here. I've actually made a few little parts here in these documents. Perhaps I can import one part into another part here and see how they fit together. For example, I have my corner bracket and I have my linear rail. How can I put this corner bracket on my linear rail and make a rectangular arrangement of these rails? That's one sort of thing. And then how can I put these brackets on here, start making a 3D printer, for example. So that's something we may want to do now. Let's maybe start with these linear rails. So here are a few of our parts. Here's an assembly here. I wonder if it's going to allow me to put parts in. Insert. Interesting. So there's some parts I can put in here. Maybe I'll put my first linear rail in here. There, my first linear rail went there. That's great. Wonder if there are other things that can, oh, other documents. Let's see, recently opened, created by me. There. Well, maybe I want to put my corner bracket in here. Create a version in corner bracket. Let's try that. Create. There, my corner bracket was imported. So there I have a corner bracket. And oh, standard content. There is partly answering one of the questions we had. Well, what about importing stuff? Maybe I need a screw, a bolt and a screw, and a class. Maybe it's, don't even remember what this one's going to be. Sauce, machine, round head bolts. Hex bolt. That'll be a good one. And size, oh, they're all in American sizes, but maybe we can put it down to a different measurement. Well, let's just, for sake of fun, we'll just put in a bolt here of that size. There's the actual size of the bolt. I may be able to play around with this and get a metric one. I actually need some 5mm ones. I'm not going to focus on this at the moment. Suffice it to say that I will go through these. Oh, there's inches. I wonder if DIN, is that metric? Oh, there's M1.6. There we are, M5. And we want hex head. There we go, M16. Oh, that's a bigger one though. Socket head. There we go. And I'm going to have a 5mm one. That's a common one. And I can even specify the length. Let's just say 8. Stainless steel. Fine. Good. I inserted that. There's my bolt. So that could actually be used and attach this one on here. So there I'm building up an assembly. So in this view, once I've inserted this, I can do different things like move this around. I can rotate it. I can drag it. And by using these various handles, I can rotate and drag my components and hopefully 90 degrees specify an exact way that they can fit together on my object. So let's just move this along here and I'll move this over this way. Look at this from the top. Whoops, I'm using my Blender shortcuts. I use Blender a lot. Go to the top view. So now that's kind of aligned. I can orient this to 0 degrees. Oh, maybe its orientation is not as I needed it. There we are. And I should be able to move this over a little. Move this up. And then bring it down. So gradually I'm dragging my piece into place where it needs to be. There are lots of little features that can be added or sort of tricks that we can do. We can snap it and we can say that it's mated between planes, for example. So I can specify that the bottom plane of this part is connected to the top plane of that part and gradually assemble these things together and snap them nicely done. So maybe I can try that in another part here. So there's one corner bracket. Now I need to get another part to make a right angle. All right, so let's add another feature here. Insert. And from the current document, my second linear rail. There we are. But this linear rail, I want to turn it around, rotate it 90 degrees, so it's going to fit here. So I inserted it. Once I've closed that window, then I get my little handles. I'm going to pull this around by 90 degrees. Oops. That didn't quite work. I think I grabbed the wrong one. That's why. Try that again. Double click here. Let's try this. Or maybe it's this one. There we are. And type in 90, enter. Oops, it still went to 50. I want 90. There we go. Sometimes you have to try a few times just to get things working. Now I may take a look from the front view, pan it up, zoom it in, and we can see here I'm going to grab this handle and move it up till it's about at that point, and I can move it over here. So I've assembled it sort of how I want it, except now it needs to move over this way. Great. So that's the basic moving around. These handles appear by double clicking, and then I can change the angle or just move it in X, Y, Z direction and start making my parts come together. So you can start to see how a 3D printer might be assembled in this sort of piece here, and how we can insert some standard content such as bolts and screws and things like this. So this can really help us to build up our pieces in our assemblies. Okay, let's see what has happened between all of these parts here. I haven't created them all together, but one thing I can do now, you see this bolt, I can turn it on or off. I can do the same with the rail to make it appear and disappear. And each one has a little eye. I can make them appear or disappear as I go. I can also organize them in assemblies in sort of like a tree or hierarchy. So I wonder if we can do that and create all of this as one. Oh, this is assembly one. There we are. So we'll just call this the 3D printer frame. I'm going to rename this frame. Okay, so there's the first assembly. Now the entire frame is an assembly and can be treated as something that can be turned on and off and be shown, especially if I make it as part of a sub-assembly of something. So I could group these things together and turn them all on and off at once. Oh, they're rigid. What's that? Okay. And then you see how I can build up my 3D printer frame like this. So how does this go? If you recall the EveryBot, I'm just going to go to this here. There's the sort of the sum of a bunch of these processes, all done with the EveryBot. The EveryBot has 5 main assemblies, all under a master assembly. So you see here, this is a viewer, an online viewer, but it's sort of giving you an idea of where we're going with all of this. I can highlight the whole thing by hovering over it, and then it's showing the various assembly parts here as I hover over them. And this is the kind of thing that's happening in OnShape as well. We can highlight sub-assemblies and even sub-assemblies. So if I expand this one here and just turn off everything else, there is my sub-assembly, which is just the chassis. And I can highlight different parts of it. Under that, there are several other sub-assemblies that I can turn off one piece at a time. There's the frame. There's the different parts here. Oh, one wheel, another wheel, and so on. And we can isolate and look at pieces one at a time. As I erase them, they sort of disappear. If I want to turn them on again, I can just turn them all on with that one check mark. And we are gradually building up our robot with these parts. So what we'll see in tomorrow's session is a lot more about how we can work with our OnShape to create such assemblies and hierarchies of parts and manage our robot that way. So at the moment, you can explore this EveryBot, and some of you already have indeed, as some of your teams made the EveryBot this year. But this gives you an idea of where we're heading in our sessions so far. So back here to our presentation. We've taken a look at parts and drawings, and we've discussed a little bit about an assembly. So we take two or more parts to make an assembly, as you saw there with my 3D printer coming together. We align the parts of the assembly with constraints. So far, I've only been doing their three-dimensional orientation. I have not done some constraints such as one plane meeting another plane and so on. Perhaps we'll go and take a look at how that can happen. And then we group parts into sub-assemblies and group of sub-assemblies into assemblies, as you saw in this EveryBot. It's a tree of sub-assemblies. Okay, so back to our OnShape then. Maybe we can try making one part align with another part. Okay, so I have this screw here. I wonder if I can constrain it to go right into this part here. It's actually not the right length of screw, but let's see what we can do. Revolute mate, slider, planar, cylindrical, pin slot, ball, and parallel. Interesting. Remove all degrees of freedom. Revolute, allow rotation about, oh yes, that's it. So these are various ways we can make things go together. And this is really good in our robot simulation. Like a slider made, that means a piece that slides against another. That would be good for some bearings. Like wheels, we'll be able to revolve around other pieces. Plane, that makes sure that two parts are in the same plane. Cylindrical mate. I wonder if this one is going to be what we need. We'll try this here. So there we are. I've got one, and maybe I'll put it on this one as well. Ah, there we are. I clicked the round part of the screw, and then I clicked the round part of this little hole here, and my screw immediately aligned its axis along the central axis of this curve here. So now the screw is in place. If I double click on just the screw, oops, I did that the wrong way. I'm going to undo that. Let's try that again. So I selected a cylindrical mate. There's the first part there. I clicked particularly on that circle. I'm holding down Shift and trying to select this. There we are. Oh, I clicked the wrong point though, and look, that didn't work so well. So I'll try that again. So make a cylindrical mate. There's one circle, and the other one should be right here. There we are. I click them carefully, and there my screw is kind of in place. I should be able to now double click this, just this screw. Whoops, I clicked the wrong button again. Sometimes you just have to practice a little. Okay, make a cylindrical mate, put this here, and zoom in. Click that there, the screw is in there, and done. Now that's good. And this one, I should be able to click on this. I wonder if I can move it around now. There we are, I just fastened the screw down in there. And this is actually not quite the right length, but it's close. So I can see that my 8mm screw is close. This whole part here does have to move though. Whoa, I was not done with that. And so there we are. I should still be able to move this over a little there, and I can center it. I can do all kinds of things and line up everything. So that's what I will do with this assembly set of tools here. I can create certain constraints between two parts and make them always together, make them revolve about each other. In this case, I align the center of a screw with the center of a hole, and so on, and gradually build up my assemblies and things like this. Then I can also work on building out this hierarchy here. And that's something I haven't really studied a whole lot of yet, exactly how to do that. I'm sure there are ways to do this by going down here, showing what's made it to what. Move to a new sub-assembly. Oh, maybe we'll try this. I'm going to try taking this here, not the frame, but maybe I'll select a few parts here, those 4 parts, and move to a sub-assembly. I'm going to call this assembly 1. And maybe I could rename this something like the subframe. Let's see, rename. For some reason, it's not letting me rename it. Maybe I'm missing that. Properties. There we are. Subframe. There we are. I applied that. And now I have my overall frame, but there's a subframe, and now the whole thing can be taken on or off as I need. And then I can view it or not view it. And there's how we create assemblies and sub-assemblies within our OnShape sort of interface. And adding and importing more and more parts, I can gradually even build up a 3D printer or an FRC robot. So the parts that we'll look at tomorrow, more about how to organize this process, how to insert parts from some standard content and some libraries that you can import, and to be a little bit more precise and organized about various kinds of organization schemes like part numbers here, various things just to make our work better. That's what will happen in tomorrow's session. So I'm just going to take a pause here and just see in the chat. Yes, and thank you, Peter. Peter had a few suggestions a while ago. I'm sorry I missed those. But right-clicking on the isometric view and add shading, it gives a nice 3D effect. Good. And thank you, Mike, for pointing out, double-clicking on the views. You can change the scale of the drawing. Let's go back to that because that's what I really wanted to do before. I'll go back to this previous part, this drawing here, and go to the Z-axis drawing tab. Let's try to double click. There we are, there's the scale. And 1 to 3 makes it smaller. Maybe I can make it 1 to 1. Made it bigger. And so there you see the scale can be changed in our drawing there. Thank you very much, Mike. So done with the properties there. How about here? Double click on these properties, do the same. Maybe make all of these 1 to 1. There we are. And now things are sort of coming up. Now I've used my space a little bit better. So there's a little bit about sketches and parts and drawings and assemblies. So at this point here, I'll go back to our little document. We've talked about assembly trees. This is a good time for some retrospective, some thoughts, some feedback, some comments. It would be really appreciated if you might help us with some feedback here, I'm just going to take this link and put it in the chat, because this will really help us understand how our sessions are going. So in the chat here, I will just send this little form. This is just a feedback form for us to reflect on this particular session. There are 3 little simple questions: what went well, what might have been improved, and any suggestions for future topics. And so I will stop the official sort of commentary now and open up the floor to any additional questions and comments you may have. And would most appreciate any feedback you might offer through this little form. I'm so sorry. I'll just go and open the form's permission here. And here are my settings, and just making the form accessible to everyone. There we are. Now everyone should be able to open the form. So we can have some time for some social interaction, some additional questions. I may stop the recording at this point here. And if you do have some additional questions, we might be able to work that into our future session. And or we can answer them right here. I'm just going to stop the recording